The drone plunged into the desert, shattering in a cloud of thick black smoke. The report read, "Remote control malfunction." The company sent flowers, the government sent condolences, and the aerospace industry stayed silent. That was it. Dr. Orion Sinclair, a brilliant black engineer once hailed as the prophet of unmanned technology, was gone. 3 seconds into the test flight. No one questioned it. No one reviewed the conclusion. Only one person refused to believe it. Nova, his daughter. She was 12. For 17 years, Nova grew up with scorched blueprints, broken lines of code, and an unshakable belief her father wasn't silenced because he was wrong, but because he was right too soon. Then, one summer morning, dressed in a faded technician's uniform, Nova stepped through the cold glass doors of Etherian Systems. No one noticed her. No one knew why she was really there. She didn't come to apply for a job. She came to uncover a death that was never truly laid to rest. No nameplate, no desk, just a temporary badge clipped to her shirt. Nova moved quietly through the security levels of Etherian Systems, dust clinging to her shoes, a worn leather tool bag slung over her shoulder. It was the only thing left of her father after the crash. Inside his notebook, buried between hundreds of equations, was a single line, fading with time. Never let them define who you are. That morning, Etherian was hosting a live demonstration of its latest drone prototype, Helix V, before defense officials and major investors. The drone had barely been airborne for 30 seconds when the auxiliary engine began to tremble. Flight control lights blinked red. Panic rippled through the control room. A lead engineer shouted, "We've lost response signal." Callan Voss, the CEO of Etherian, stood stiff, face tight like wire. Then his eyes locked onto Nova, standing silently in the corner, watching. He gave a crooked smile, stepped forward. "If you think you're so brilliant, fix it, right here, in front of everyone." A public trap, an insult dressed as a challenge. But Nova said nothing. She knelt, opened her father's old tool bag. No tremble, no words, no refusal. Nova knelt beneath the drone's body, fingers gliding swiftly over the circuitry, eyes locked onto the diagnostic panel flashing erratically. 90 seconds. She removed the protective casing. 120 seconds. She unplugged the data line, rewiring it using an old-school bypass technique. 180 seconds. She stood up, wiped the soot from her hands onto her pants. The issue's not in the main system. It's a feedback conflict from the auxiliary AI. Internal pulse frequency is caught in reverse resonance. No one fully grasped what she said, but they all understood what happened next. Helix V rebooted. Indicator lights turned green. The engine purred, low and steady, like a quiet breath. The drone rose into the air like a freed bird, unshackled. No tremble, no stutter. Smooth as a ribbon of black silk slicing through a gray sky. The control room fell silent. Investors exchanged stunned glances. A military general gave a subtle nod. Callan Voss clapped. 3 slow, deliberate, mocking claps. Impressive, for a temp tech. His smile curled, but his eyes, cold as unsharpened steel. Nova said nothing, because she knew the sky had just been fixed, exactly the way her father once dreamed. After that reluctant performance that left the entire room speechless, Nova thought, maybe now she'd earned a sliver of respect. But no. The next day, she was assigned to the far back corner of the engineering floor, right next to the supply closet, across from a 3D printer that hadn't worked since last year. Her tasks: wipe whiteboards, sort wires, organize screws by color code. No one spoke to her. No one taught her anything. No one even said hello. Then someone finally did. Jude Tamlin, a young engineer with a ponytail and a smile so relentlessly hopeful, it felt like life hadn't crushed him yet. "Hey," he said, holding out 2 cups of coffee. "I got exiled out here too. They call me the Overthinker, 'cause I asked Callan a question he didn't like." Jude led Nova, quietly, off the grid, to an old systems archive room, a forgotten place, still holding digital blueprints no one had bothered to update. And buried in that neglected trove, Nova found something that made her heart skip. The routing algorithm of Helix V, marked with patterns, logic branches, even shorthand notes, that matched exactly what her father once scribbled on a garage whiteboard in 2006. They hadn't buried it all. A piece of Orion Sinclair was still alive, inside the very system they dared to call a revolution. One late afternoon, while Jude was busy recalibrating the inductive charging system, Nova moved quietly through the parts storage room, a place so thick with dust that every step she took left footprints in time. On the lowest shelf of a crooked metal rack, she found a small box, no label on the side, barely legible. "Forbidden Experiment, 2007. Do not reuse." Inside was a silver-gray AI control module, coated in a thin layer of rust, like it hadn't been touched in over a decade. But Nova recognized it instantly. The shape, the structure, and most of all, the 3-tiered parallel transmission lines. It was unmistakable. This was the upgraded version of the model her father had labored over, the one he stayed up nights trying to perfect. A multi-layered, self-learning AI system, capable of adapting its flight logic in real time. The same system that had been wiped from all official records, erased from every archive in the central network. But they'd forgotten to erase the most critical copy of all: the memory of a daughter who once watched it being sketched in white chalk on a blackboard in their tiny garage. Jude sat at the workbench, plugging the old module into a data reader he had salvaged from a half-burned circuit board. The current flickered. The screen blinked, hesitating between life and death. "This drive's badly damaged," Jude muttered, frowning. "If we're lucky, we'll get a few raw code fragments." Nova said nothing. She simply placed her hand on her father's worn leather notebook, as if lending it strength. Then, a low buzz crackled through the speakers. A distorted audio loop stuttered in and out, and slowly began to clear. "If you're hearing this, it means I've been silenced. Don't let them use Phoenix to erase the truth." No name, no image. But Nova knew that voice instantly, the voice of Dr. Orion Sinclair. The air in the lab froze. Only the heavy breath of disbelief remained, and Nova's eyes, reddened but razor-sharp. A man long gone was still whispering, not to be mourned, but to remind them. Phoenix was never a beginning. It was the tool to end what had once been buried. Ayla Cade sat alone at a small cafe near the old test site, the place where Nova had traced the trail of reports everyone else had dismissed as meaningless. Her face was sun-worn, her left arm part metal implant, a scarred remnant from the explosion 17 years ago. "You're his daughter?" Ayla asked. No need for confirmation. "You look just like him, even the way you stare at control panels. Same eyes." Nova nodded silently. She hadn't come to reopen wounds. She came for the truth. And Ayla was the last living witness. Ayla took a slow sip of coffee, then said it straight. Yes. There was an order. They pushed the test. Even though the AI was unstable, reflex bugs still unresolved. Your father objected. He wanted to delay. Nova clenched her fists. They said it was an accident. Ayla met her gaze, haunted, unblinking. Number it was a decision, signed, stamped, and made official with an explosion. An explosion that took her father's life and left behind a witness no one ever asked, until today. Rain fell hard by day's end. Nova left Etherian later than usual, her thin jacket soaked through with cold. As she stepped into the parking lot, a sleek black sedan slid silently up to the curb. The window rolled down. Inside sat Callan Voss, silver hair perfectly combed, his smile carved from marble. "You don't have to sneak around," he said. "I knew who you were from the beginning. You're just like him, too reckless, and too naive to think the truth will save you." Nova stepped forward slowly, rain drenching her hair, but her voice steady as steel. "And you're just like the man I remember, a thief of legacies, hiding your crimes behind titles and stock options." Callan's smile faded. His eyes shifted, from cold to cautious. "You'd be wise to know where this ends. Your father didn't, and he paid for it." Nova took a step back, unblinking. "Then you should be worried, because I didn't come to stop. I came to finish what he started." The car door slammed shut. Blood-red taillights cut through the curtain of rain. The war was no longer silent. It had been declared. The second test flight of Helix Phi unfolded beneath a blazing sun, surrounded by rows of military media lenses, all pointed and ready. Callan Voss stood before a massive LED screen, preaching endlessly about industry-leading stability and the most advanced self-adjusting AI ever built. Nova stood at the edge of the command zone, barred from direct involvement. But she knew. She knew that in last week's software build, the looped feedback bug still lingered, and no one had bothered to fix it. So she'd planted an override system, buried deep beneath a layer of auxiliary control code, set to activate only if the primary system entered emergency state. And then, it happened. At 300 meters, Helix V shook violently. Alarms lit up. The pilot's voice cracked through comms. "No response. Flight OS is dropping control signals." Nova lunged toward the secondary console, whispered into the internal mic. "Trigger the backup switch. Bottom right corner. Red light. Marked with an N." 3 seconds later, Helix V stabilized, landed without incident. The crowd burst into applause, but Callan didn't clap. He stormed toward Nova, rage too raw to mask. "You embedded unauthorized software into a military-grade system? Do you have any idea what laws you just broke?" Nova was suspended on the spot. No explanation, no defense, not a single thank you. Even though she had just saved lives. There was no explosion this time, but something else had ignited. The truth. And it had caught fire from that very spark. 3 days after her suspension, Nova appeared in an abandoned Etherian warehouse. Test Site D, deserted since 2010. With her were 3 names missing from every official org chart. Jude, the engineer demoted for refusing to stay silent. Ayla Cade, the survivor pilot, carrying memories forged in fire and metal. And finally, Dr. Zara Lane, an independent AI expert, terminated by Callan for exposing the ethical breaches in his code. No funding, no laboratory, no cutting-edge machines, only the handwritten designs of Dr. Orion Sinclair, pages stained with sweat, coffee, and dreams. "We're not fixing Helix," Nova said. "We're resurrecting Phoenix, the design my father was never allowed to finish." Under the dim amber light, they began soldering each joint, threading every wire, fine-tuning every line of code, not to fly, but to prove the truth that was once burned away can rise again from ash. And this time, Phoenix won't die in silence. It will roar, with the voice of justice. That night, when Jude returned to the old workshop to grab more design drafts, he noticed the security door was unlocked. Quietly, he pulled out his phone, hit record, and stepped inside, only to catch Gareth Thorne, Etherian's head of engineering, bent over Nova's laptop. "Gareth?" Jude's voice tightened. "What the hell are you doing?" Gareth flinched, but didn't deny it. He exhaled, shoulders slumping like a man too tired to keep pretending. "I'm not here to sabotage anything," he said. "I came to see what she might know." After a tense silence, he sank into a chair and pulled out an old folder. "Back then, I signed off on the removal of Phoenix's safety protocols. Preston. He threatened to leak my thesis plagiarism from MIT. One slip-up from decades ago." His eyes blurred. His voice cracked low. "I chose my career, and her father lost his life. In that makeshift lab, truth didn't need to be forced out, because darkness can't stay silent. Once regret begins to speak." In an emergency meeting of Ethereum's executive board, Callan Voss stood before the presentation screen, voice sharp and calculated. "She installed unauthorized software. She's a security threat. I move to terminate all contracts, effective immediately." No one objected. The vote was seconds away. Then the doors burst open. Jude walked in. No request for permission, no polite preamble. He placed a single USB drive on the boardroom table. "Before you vote, you need to hear this." He pressed play. Callan's voice filled the room. Crisp, cold, undeniable. "Wipe it all. Anything connected to Sinclair. Original models, test data, hand-drawn schematics, even the base AI. We don't need a ghost haunting the quarterly reports." Silence fell like a dropped curtain. One of the legal directors cleared her throat. "Vote is postponed. I move to launch an internal investigation. Immediately." Callan clenched his jaw, eyes burning with fury. But the voice he once tried to silence was now echoing loud and clear inside the very room he once ruled without question. The internal investigation unlocked a door Ethereum had kept sealed for nearly 20 years. With temporary access restored, Nova navigated through deeply encrypted folders, layers buried so far down, even the company's current IT staff no longer remembered how to open them. And then, she found it. A copy of the original AI source code, file name, Phoenix Core 1.7, B creation date, 3 days before the fatal test flight, last modified by Orion Sinclair. In the code's comment section, she saw it. A line written in a shaky but unmistakable hand, as if her father had just typed it that morning. Final note: never sacrifice safety for the sake of speed. Intelligence can never replace conscience. Nova wept, but not from grief. She cried because she saw her father. Not in a photograph, but in the clarity of thought still alive in every line of code. And now, those lines wouldn't remain buried on some forgotten server. They would speak, as testimony, and as truth. Nova didn't wait for the board. She didn't wait for the investigation. She wrote a single article, just one, but every line cut through the camouflage of the past 17 years, like a scalpel. Title: Bloodborne Drone, the technology that flew on my father's death. She laid it bare. The test flight, the deleted safety system, the source code signed by Orion, and the recording of Callan ordering the erasure of everything tied to Sinclair. Just no dramatics. Laid out raw, like unfinished metal still stained with heat. The article spread like wildfire. AI engineers reposted it with captions like, "This is why ethics in tech is non-negotiable." Military pilots chimed in. If not for Nova, that second test could have taken another life. Tech media outlets flooded the airwaves. Hashtag, #fly with truth. Within hours, it was trending worldwide. Callan once believed the media was his ally, but today, it had become the wings of justice, and it was flying straight at him at a speed he could no longer control. at an abandoned military airfield in Nevada. Once nothing but sand and silence. A makeshift radar array now stood, flanked by an international transmission hub. There, on a sun-baked runway, Phoenix, the drone rebuilt by Nova and her team, stood still, poised like a creature about to rise from ash. Military officials, international experts, and retired pilots who had once flown alongside Ayla gathered in quiet anticipation. No ceremony, no fanfare, just a small platform and a single operator, Nova Sinclair. She wore a plain white flight suit, no logos, no sponsors, only one symbol, hand-printed across the back, a pair of flaming wings, the original Phoenix emblem, erased long ago from every official document. The morning light cut through the hangar, casting a sharp beam across the console as Nova placed her hand on the throttle. Her voice rang clear through the internal comms. "Phoenix, prepare for takeoff." The rotors whirred, the ground gave a gentle tremble, and Phoenix rose. No errors, no shudder, no warnings. Her father had once been silenced over a drone they said had failed. Today, his daughter made that very drone fly again, not for vengeance, but to declare, loud and clear, legacy doesn't die, it flies. 3 weeks after Phoenix's successful flight, a federal courtroom opened its doors for a criminal trial against Callan Voss, the once untouchable CEO who had manipulated an entire industry. Charges: destruction of evidence, falsifying technical records, knowingly disabling a safety system that led to a death. Gareth Thorne, former head of engineering, was no longer hidden in the shadows. He stood accused of concealing evidence, aiding in data erasure, and lying to federal investigators. When Nova entered the courtroom, the gallery rose to its feet, not for the law, but out of respect. She didn't glance at Callan, didn't acknowledge Gareth. She looked only forward, to the witness stand, where a small photograph of her father rested. "My father didn't die because of a machine failure," she said, voice low but forged in steel. "He died because of honesty, because there are people who can't survive integrity in a world built on control." The courtroom fell silent. No need for volume, no need for theatrics. Because truth, when spoken at the right moment, is already the heaviest sentence of all. 3 days after the trial, with the media lights fading into the background, Nova received a small envelope, worn brown, sealed with red wax. Ayla delivered it herself. "Your father asked me to keep this. He said, only give it to her when she's ready, to fly on her own wings." Nova opened it, hands trembling. Inside was a handwritten letter. The ink had smudged in places. The paper had yellowed with time. But the handwriting, slanted, precise, was unmistakable. Dr. Orion Sinclair, engineered and elegant, just like the lines he once taught her to draw. "My Nova, if you're reading this, I'm probably gone. But truth doesn't need me to survive. It only needs someone strong enough to keep believing in it and never let go. You don't need revenge. You don't need to shout. Just keep walking with a straight spine and a clean heart. And remember, Phoenix isn't just a machine. It's how we say, justice was never programmed to stay silent." Nova folded the letter, placed her hand gently over her heart. The sky above that day was clear, crystal blue, as if someone somewhere was smiling down. The following month, at the largest press conference in the history of civil aviation, the newly appointed board of Etherian Systems made a declaration that sent shockwaves through the entire industry. The company would officially change its name to Sinclair Flight Works. The reason, stated clearly, to honor Dr. Orion Sinclair, who gave his brilliance, his courage, and ultimately his life for the safety of global flight. For the first time ever, an international aerospace tech giant bore the name of a black engineer, a man once erased from every document, dismissed as a technical failure. Reporters swarmed Nova, calling her the symbol of a new era. The board offered her the CEO seat, but Nova simply smiled. "I didn't come here to run things," she said. "I came to unlock the doors that were once slammed shut on people like my father." Instead, she chose to lead the Sinclair Initiative, a program dedicated to training young engineers, especially Black, Latinx, and those written off by their resumes before they ever had a chance to dream. Renaming an empire wasn't just a political act. It was Nova's way of proving truth, once rewritten, can fly farther than any blueprint ever imagined. At a STEM workshop hosted by the Sinclair Initiative in Atlanta, Nova was speaking with a group of students when a shy black girl, maybe 9 years old, stepped forward quietly. Clutched in her hands was a folded sheet of paper, smudged with crayon, depicting a fiery winged aircraft soaring through the stars. On the body of the plane, the child had scribbled in big, uneven letters, "Firewing 1.0. Ms. Sinclair," the girl whispered, "do you think my idea could ever fly?" Nova knelt beside her, gently unfolding the trembling hands. She looked at the drawing. No corrections, no critiques, just a smile, slow, deep, steady. "Not only will it fly, sweetheart," Nova said, as she reached into her jacket and pulled out a gleaming phoenix-shaped pin, clipping it onto the girl's collar. "It'll fly higher than anything Etherian ever dreamed of, as long as you never let anyone tell you your dream is wrong." Amid a room full of tech models and advanced theories, a spark had just been passed, to continue what Nova's father once dared to begin. The sunset cast an amber glow over the old test field, wind brushing softly across the runway, where Phoenix 2, the most complete version of the drone Orion once dreamed of, stood ready for flight. No media, no officials, only one person stood there, Nova Sinclair, wearing a white coat, her hand resting on the aircraft's body like she was touching a living soul. She bowed her head and whispered, "We're not just building aircraft. We're rebuilding trust. Trust in justice, in intellect that isn't manipulated, in voices that were once forced into silence." The engine hummed to life, smooth, steady, like a heartbeat. Phoenix 2 lifted off, gliding across the horizon as a quiet ripple of applause followed, from young engineers, retired pilots, and children holding dreams just now being born. No one clapped for specs. No one cheered for speed. They clapped, because inside that machine was a truth once extinguished and now burning bright again. Its name is Phoenix, and it doesn't fly alone. It carries with it every soul the world tried to forget.